welcome everybody. We're about 4 after. So let's get rolling with the websites meeting. This is the beginning of September. If couple of things. One, we record our calls. We post them on YouTube. Embarrass yourself or your parents or your mom at the same time, I suppose, at your own risk. Also, if this is your first time on this specific call, even if you've been on other Layer 5 calls, take a moment, if you would, to introduce yourself. Say hi. There's different people that show up to different calls. And so it's good to introduce a few times over so that people can get to know you. And so any newcomers on the call, anybody that hasn't gotten a chance to say hi. Here. All right. And so quick check, Shreyans, have you, Shreya, well, yeah, it's Shreyans, not Shreyas. Shreyans, have you been on this call before? If not, you'll be forced to say hi.
No, I was all before. I
see. Got you. Okay, very good. You're already making the rounds. You've already landing PRs, already changing our roadmaps. I see. Okay. It's in the US, like when you get into, well, a lot of times if you get into boxing, like with your fists, with well, they'll refer to someone like you as a ringer, like someone you don't expect that comes through and just takes everybody out, just KOs everybody, knocks everybody out. So I'm on to you. I know what you're up to. Okay, bad analogy. I don't think it translates very well. All right. Well, we've got a couple of topics up today. The first one, actually, we're not going to be able to get to. This is terrible. If you try to visit this site right now, is it down for you? It is down for me. It is down.
Yeah, it's down for me too. I was just trying to even discuss and staging, both are down.
Oh, the staging is down. Well, okay.
Oh, wait, staging is not down, but it's slow to load. Like you get in, but it's really slow.
Got you. Okay. So, all right. Well, this is clearly that's not good. Now, this site. So, Rudraksh Parikh, he's looking into it right now, which is nice. He's not on the call, but rather he's looking into what's going on with the site itself. So there's a number of you that have access to our AWS accounts and to that system in specific. So just to sort of speak to this briefly, the technology that we're using to run this forum, it's Discourse, which you've all seen in various capacities, like here, just a random example, discourse.linkerd.io. Linkerd, as a project, they're running an instance of Discourse. So too are we running an instance of Discourse at discuss.layer5.io. We might switch and have the CNCF pay for a hosted instance of Discourse for us. To date, we've been running our own on-prem version or our own standalone instance of it. And we've been having a heck of a time having it run performantly and just run. That was actually going to be part of today's topic, was talking about how to speed it up. So we've gone through some troubleshooting. So the deployment here is really simple. There's a single instance virtual machine running, I think it's 3 things. I think it's the Discourse application server. I think there's a small copy of Nginx on there, mostly to handle SSL, the termination of SSL. And then I think there's a local instance. No, I don't know. I don't know if there's an instance of Redis on the machine or not. That may very well be part of our, something that will help us overcome our challenge. Everybody familiar with Redis or its function?
Yeah.
A bit, yeah. Okay, good. Then I won't. I think someone said yes, so that means I won't cover it, which is nice. And then a connection to Postgres. And so there's a Postgres instance that's running that's dedicated to this site. And then there's two copies of this site. So there's the production site, and then there's a staging site where many of you have administrative access to do stuff on the staging site, do stuff like develop things, try out things that you want to move over to the production instance. That staging site is looks like this, I believe, which to Aditya's point is up, but kind of slow. And for the staging site, that's all right, but not for the production site. Like this, if the production site was this slow, which it actually is often, then people aren't going to stick around. There's a lot of discrepancies, by the way, between what the staging site looks like and what the production site looks like, which is bad because we really, as you're trying out your changes, you want to guarantee that they're going to look the same, one site as they do the next. So anyway, we're having problems with trying to run this thing. And it's in part because, has anyone ever dealt with it's probably older than some of you are. It's like PHP bulletin board or Joomla, or there's a bunch of different content management systems that were either written in Ruby, PHP, Ruby or PHP, or like Perl or something. And they're terribly, or Java or something like that. Not a lot of them written in Java, but just like languages like that. Yeah, sure. Are terrible to scale. Those systems are terrible to scale. We're having problems with this one. So it's, I think the issue with having the CNCF pay for a hosted instance is that it would no longer be for Get Nighthawk, potentially not for Service Mesh Performance, but like only for Meshery. We might, because it would be hosted on, it would be like discuss.meshery.io, not layer5.io, which means that questions about the community or announcements or they would be ill-placed. While Service Mesh Performance is a CNCF project, we would, I don't know if there would need to be a separate instance for that, which means it would be totally dead. We would have a hard time getting any traffic going. So that's kind of the dilemma that we face. So we've played around with giving more resources to the virtual machines here. So we've gone from one's like I think a T2 medium to a T3 medium, back to a T2 medium. One thing that's interesting to note is that if the staging site is also relatively slow, something they may have in common. Well, one is something they may have in common is how they're communicating with, Postgres, with the database, which in this case is running under RDS. If the database is slow to respond, that will certainly slow the whole works. So I guess this topic is mostly for awareness. we definitely, there's another issue that's gone on, is that we've also had an outstanding issue with email and the way that email is being sent from the server. So it's an old app, and it really wants to interact with the email over SMTP. And the way that it wants to do that is using someone's username and password and then storing that in clear text on the server. And there's a bunch of issues with that. I mean, there's some security concerns, but there's also having to pay for and dedicate a separate email address for that system. Or if you don't, then using some person's email, which makes it look like all the emails that come out of discuss.layer5.io come from a person, which many of you have probably seen that it was coming from Abhishek Kumar's email address. And so that was an issue. And so we've dedicated now a separate email address that's generic, but that setup has not gone through very well. And so, very frustrating. We will absolutely revive the Discuss forum and bring the resources that it needs. And so, that's the status. So it might be Rudraksh that ends up picking up the torch here. So, by the way, Josh often hosts these particular calls. Josh Patel, he mentioned a little earlier that he's got a conflict with a class. And so Josh has also been the gentleman, there's a lot of people who've contributed to Discuss, but Josh has also been kind of on point there. So as we transition from creating the thing to operating the thing, Rudraksh might step in to help. So any thoughts beyond what I just said about the Discuss forum? Anybody have any experience running one of these? It turns out that this one's kind of a pain in the rump. It would be funny to think that that's a way of discourse helping get people to pay for hosting, having them host it is to make it awful to try to run yourself. The catch-22 there is that it wouldn't have become a popular discussion forum, popular project if it was so difficult to run. You wouldn't think anyway. Okay, all right. So moving on to the next topic, and that is on. Well, I was hoping to have a discussion on learning paths, and I was hoping that Luke Juggery might show up. Luke, some of you are familiar with him. Luke's a Docker captain. Luke's been a friend of the community for a long time. Part of how the community was established was based on giving service mesh workshops. And so Luke had helped deliver one at DockerCon a few years ago. And anyway, Luke does well by training people. And he's always, and so clearly part of him being involved in that workshop and then is an example of him enjoying training people. And so I was just introducing him to what we were doing with learning paths, hoping he might be here, but that also gives us an excuse to spend some time on it. So Nikhil, how far away are we from being able to open up like the first one or the first two courses, paths? Oh, I'm looking at the wrong Nikhil. Okay, I'm getting all my Nikhils and my Nitishs all. Okay, I'm sorry. I thought Nikhil Lada was on. All right. So we definitely need to poke him. I didn't realize we had the real Nikhil Sharma on. That's the. So what's the question is how far away are we from the first learning path or just first course? Okay. All right. Anybody have comments on the learning paths or anyone unfamiliar with them? Anyone think that this page needs just a little bit of work? Just a little bit right here. And then a little bit of a coloring or discoloring here, a separation.
Coloring is good, what I think, in the below. Yes, yes. Good. Like we can use different colors, like 5 courses, 16 chapters, like 5 can be of different color and 16 can be of different. So it can like more.
Nice. Yeah. So let me do this. Let me share my whole screen to make sure we can. By the way, everyone on the call, do you all have access to the design files in Figma for layer 5 and for Meshry? Hopefully. I ask in part because it's been a while since I looked to see if we sort of hit our design. We never really landed on the exact one that we wanted to use, because this was close, but eye gouging, maybe, with just the use of the colors. Otherwise, it's pretty good. So here, this was offset before because of this shaded background. Okay, this advert, so to speak, was never really separated, so that's maybe not good. So if we go to
Does that button lead to discuss? Like join our community, or what does that do? Okay, that goes
to Slack. Here was an alternative version, and this one was perhaps overwhelming. It wasn't a high enough level overview of learning paths itself. And so, but this is what that looked like. So this was shaded, this background, okay. So then another one, kind of the same design, it wasn't. So those that's not very helpful. There's a few that have been archived that were kind of down below. It doesn't look like they took much of a different approach. So just trying to refresh. So okay, so to Anshuman's point, good. Here is, it's worth refreshing that, or it's worth recounting that the thing that we're all right. It's actually, it's yeah, this is probably good to kind of recap overall. And that is that layer 5 right now, the site has 3 types of helpful resources, or hopefully helpful resources about this tech. So one of them is books. So there's layer5io/learn/ should be /books. Let's see. Oh, okay, no, it's actually service mesh -books. Okay, so when you go just to that subsection of books, it's just a different overview of the fact that there's 4 of them, and you can click over to one or to the next, and then click on it again, and you'd go to that one. Okay, that's good. If you go back to the top level category /learn books. Oh, okay, workshops. This section, good. So if you visit that, it's learn/service mesh workshops. Okay, here's our workshops. These workshops, by the way, you all can go walk through them. The materials are open, and you should go walk through them. Okay, fine. That's the other third. The last third is interactive labs, which some of us were working on yesterday. these interactive labs, they are exposed here on the Layer5 IO site. Okay, good. So that there's three types of the ways that we're trying to help people learn. What we're doing now is bringing in a fourth type called learning paths. And the way to get to that today is /learn -ng for like next generation. But the point here is that it'll actually be a fourth way of learning. So it'll be overall on that first page, the /learn page, we'll need a fourth category that talks about a learning path and how people can initiate one, walk through a number of courses, take some quizzes at the end, maybe get a certificate. Now, the learning paths themselves and the way that they work is that there's a particular information architecture to them. There's a particular series of things that people know, the way that this is structured, I guess I would say. So it looks like this. So sort of generically, there will be a learning path. And within that path, there'll be a course, multiple courses. Inside a given course, there's different sections, and those sections might have just various topics and labs. At the end of the section, maybe a quiz. So someone would have taken the whole course with a couple of sections, they'll complete a course, go to the next one, and that's a learning path itself. So we haven't given a lot of examples, but maybe there's a learning path that's like mastering service meshes for developers. And so one of the courses that developers would go through as they go to master a service mesh is how to secure your service mesh, or how to use a service mesh to secure your infrastructure, whichever way it is. And so they engage in the course, securing the mesh. So there's different sections, different topics. There's a topic on mutual TLS and its concepts. And maybe this is actually not a well-written example. So we should update this, but the point is that they step through it. They'll take some labs. They take labs just on one mesh though, not on multiple. Because what they want to do is we're providing them the ability to start a learning path, go through a course, select the specific service mesh that they'd like to learn on, and walk through those labs, each of them using that same type of service mesh. Good. And then so there would be another course like under this same learning path. Instead of securing the mesh, maybe it's observing the mesh for developers. And that's kind of the structure. So we've tried to represent that structure here. Like I don't know how, honestly, I haven't done an audit here, so I don't know quite what we're going to discover. But let's say that you've got mastering service mesh for developers. So we click in here. It says that there's some prereqs to being able to take the learning path. Okay, fine. Get familiar with Meshery. Fine. Then you can go through different courses. So, and I don't know, these might just be kind of made up, but here's the securing the service mesh that we were just talking about, improving the service mesh. So securing the service mesh, I guess when we click on either the two of these, it takes us to this section. So you can go into one of these courses. So in the course called Securing the Service Mesh, there's 2 chapters or 2 topics. Okay, and so then you go into the first topic and like, so. So the navigation needs a little bit of review. It is set up to go deep and to let people, walk through these. A learning path itself is a journey. So there's a lot to it, but anyway, as people are navigating through, if they're looking to understand and take this content using this type of mesh, great, they'll click it and it will show them Istio specific things. If it was to be on this type of mesh, then the content should update and change to be on that specific type. Structurally, we're mostly there. I think there's a little bit of consistency, like just even in the coloring here. If this were to stay yellow, okay, if I were to be back up here, if this is purple, for whatever reason, it doesn't make sense that this is purple, but let's say that it was. It would make sense to kind of leave that same coloring throughout so that people have a sense that they're tracking the same thing. The cookie crumb trails, so to speak, like here, they're perhaps not as obvious as you might like for them to be. I could see people getting lost in how they're navigating, you know, more deeply through this. So you can go back, you can go back, you can go back. Those are inconsistent, both in size and placement. So we should stop right there and say, that's actually something for us to go fix, go work on. I'm gonna write that down and ask, does that make sense to anyone? Is that something that anyone thinks they might be able to add some consistency to how it is that people are able to navigate back? Courses. Back. Anybody? If it doesn't feel comfortable to anyone, we don't have to, no one has to pick it up.
Hey, so what exactly do the navigation part needs to be focused on? The placement of the icon, where it is available.
Yeah, I think, yeah, it's both, like take a look at the size of the font and the location of where this is placed. This is placed just above a, whatever this is called, a menu.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then we say, well, you know, yeah, we're interested in securing the service mesh. So we'll drop into there. The font is larger. It's still over on the left-hand side. It does have more space between this. It's you know, it's up in the course sec. It's just inconsistent. If people, it's people are much more lazy than I'm being. You know, it might be that if we were to have learning paths, if it were more of a cookie crumb trail and not just a single back, people might have more of a sense that they're like 2 levels deep. Here, I know that it would be quite deep if we showed all 3 levels here, but it might be the thing to do. Part of it, Nikhil, I don't know if you heard me talking about the use of color here and how.
Yeah, I did a bit of it. Like when I joined, we were already discussing what the colors were. So yeah, the colors which are being used on the course of OPH is something which is not yet finalized. It was there from the beginning when we started the code for this.
Gotcha. Yeah. I don't know. I think there's different techniques that can be used, but there's somewhere in here between either just a universal menu that people can see that they're sort of drilling, like there's something, there's 1 or 2 elements that need to be very consistent so that people know, okay, here's where I am and here's how I can nav forward and nav back or nav between those hierarchies. I don't know. Yeah.
Actually, the design what we have as of now, like it is all completely similar to what we have at Storybook, like even the table of contents hierarchy. But
Yeah, I hate to, yes. Which is that, so that's really good. I don't know, I hate to say this, like, I don't know that okay, good. I don't know that this ever really, there's actually like a little bit of a different, like there's, so we have the top level learning path.
The
We
middle
have-
page, which highlights all the courses, was impromptu made. It is there in, if you scroll down, just below that part, the 3 pages that we have. Yeah, that. It was a combination of these 2 pages. The right 2 pages, the combination of right 2 pages led out to the lecture.
I mean, it looks pretty good. Like the overall, the top level learning path, like, hey, this is, this is pretty great. There's a couple of minor tweaks about like the size of the lettering here, and then just some visual separator between like this area, this section, and this section. But that's easy enough to, like, just 2 minor little tweaks, and this looks pretty fantastic. And it's okay that when people drill into one of these, that they kind of, that it can look completely different than the overview. But from here going forward, I could see people losing their way. It might just be that they lose that, this menu in the middle. Here they lose it. They keep going and they get it back.
So what we can do is we can do one thing. We can also comment out the menu on the second page. That we have.
Comment out
And-
the which one?
Yeah, and if you go back go back to the on this page, we can remove the menu that we have and only keep the prerequisites and the courses. So that
Yeah.
and we can have only the menu on the courses page so that the users can navigate to any of the chapters on each of the courses.
I think that could make a lot of sense, that you're sitting here like, okay, oh wow, they have a whole program. Oh, okay, and so I could go learn in this area. And it looks like this thing goes on. Okay, yeah, this is me. I'm a developer. I want to drill into this and see. Looks like they've got a few things. And then, yeah, to your point, if this is gone, they're like, oh, so they've got this whole learning path. It's okay. I need to know this stuff in order to take. Okay, this is the meat of what it's about. So there's a whole course on this and a whole course on, okay. So I'll drill in just to, oh yeah. Like, yeah, you could, so when they drill in here, it may not be too bad that it would say, okay, well, this is what that course looks like. And here's an outline, some high level data about it. The table of contents. That it might be intuitive enough if they want to navigate back that. So this is a, yeah, it might be that if we use the word learning path somewhere, I mean, we do here, so that, but on the courses page, I think we used, yeah. Your suggestion about removing this, I think helps. If we maybe use the word learning path somewhere here, that might help people understand that. It might even be that on this main page, we would speak to the fact that there's multiple paths.
Can we like just add a tagline to the like subheading, like a learning path? That would be good.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. So just as a point of reflection, if we look at this site, so there's learn.hashicorp.com. Okay, it's not obvious. This says get to know our products, but so it's not obvious necessarily that these are learning paths for a given product, but But anyway, so you click on a product. It says, okay, well, okay, guess there's a lot to look through here. Interesting. It doesn't necessarily go in sequence per se. Like you'd go on a journey learning through this. But you look over here and it's like, okay, there's 4 different tutorials. And you would expect that a given tutorial might go on for a while. Okay, fine. Then this is getting started on Kubernetes. There's this service mesh, 7 tutorials just for, so even here, like their hierarchy and their sort of structure of the content is like, it very much so lets people choose things a la carte. Like, oh yeah, I'm working with ECS. And so I'll dive right into there. If we start on this first set of 7 tutorials, we click in, and I guess this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 tutorials. Authenticate to service communication. It'll take you about 2 hours to go through the 7 tutorials, I think. Okay. So we'll start on this first one, which takes about 6 minutes. Okay. You're starting to get a sense that, you know, that this is a collection. These all go together under this topic. I don't know. Anyway, those are that's the kind of thing that we have to think aloud about. And it had been a while since I'd looked at the learning path, so it's easy for me to be an ignoramus and not, you know, and sort of fiddle my, you know, sort of randomly click my way through. This is, I mean, actually, as you look at it, like this is no less confusing than what they've got going on here. The reason that this is maybe slightly better is that this section, I believe, remains consistent. So we drive in, so that it does change the content of it now, the deeper you get in, but for 2 levels of it, it stays the same. It is nice that they show this interconnection, these dots. So you do get a sense that, okay, I need to probably start at the top and then walk through this. As I drill in, it does get more specific. That's good. And then it does have these same 4 bullets. And those look to be the same 4 bullets that are here. Okay, good. And then, yeah, I go through my specific content and next step. And then you go to the next. Understand console service mesh, understand console service mesh. Okay, next. Okay, good. Yeah. Anyway, for Nikhil Lada, I think he's probably rolling his eyes like, yeah, we've only talked about this 90 times. Like, it's what we have is pretty great. I am not complaining. I am trying to be an ignorant user, or like trying to.
I guess this is a long pending requirement that the design of this section, like complete learning, has to be updated. And we have an epic already open for it, but it hasn't got much attention. So I think it's high time we should take a serious look at it. Considering the working of the site is totally complete, like navigating to different courses or switching between service meshes. We have all the features that we want enabled.
Gotcha. Yep. Well, good. Well, so Nikhil, to recap, it sounds like what do you think about us putting a subtitle here called Learning Path? Is
only
that
learning path, or like a tagline also, like a learning path for developers, or something like that?
Oh, okay. And then you're thinking about the removal of this. Okay. And so, cool. Yeah, I don't know. I feel poorly because I know on my side of helping review this, I've only given it like, you know, like half of an eyeball. Like I've only haven't given it full and clear and descriptive thought. It's pretty great. I'm not, this this whole thing is pretty great. Good. Well, Nikhil, as you think about that, or as you potentially have open issues in call of volunteers, I'm pretty sure Zain and Anshuman on the call are, at least I've seen Anshuman tear things up on meshry.io. And Zain was raising his hand. And so a couple of gentlemen that you might lean into.
Sure. I will get into it.
Okay. Any other comments on the learning paths? Okay. All right. So there's another one here about patterns. Aditya, you want to talk about this?
Yeah, I'll just share my screen. Yeah, there was an issue created to create a create a service mesh patterns page for meshry.io. So I had been working on that. I have a PR open, which is still in draft. Just give me a second, I can't find it. Yeah, so this is what I have done right now. I have added some sample patterns. I think I have added like 27 of them for now. So first what I thought was we would add all the entire pattern over here, but for 60 patterns that would be way too long of a page to have. So right now I've just added a pattern named the ID and the pattern type. So what else that I plan on doing is adding a filter here based on the type of patterns that is. So you can filter out the type of pattern that you need to see, and then also add a download YAML feature so that you can directly get the pattern from here itself. Yeah, that's what I've done till now. So yeah, I think Devupriya wanted to work on this as well. So if she wants to do something to it as well.
Nice. And did you say Devupriya?
Yeah, I think she wanted to do something to this as well.
There, it's amazing how it only takes, like 7 seconds to explain, 7 days worth of work. But great, like very little direction given here, and you've created a catalog of patterns and doing the right thing by like summarizing, some of the more interesting details, and then letting people get at the thing, like to download the YAML. You've done it in a collection. You've got, by the way, you've got foresight to let people filter based on their interest, and like, that it all sounds pretty great. There's a prior piece of artwork, or there's a prior example. There's a collection of community members that has been removed from meshry.io or hidden from meshry.io because, but it has a filter on there that might be helpful to you.
Yeah. Oh, right. I didn't think of that.
So on this, this is great. So by the way, it's patterns are most likely going to be a really, well, if they're not a really big deal, then maybe Meshry is in trouble, I guess is what I would say. They'll be, I think, quite intriguing to people, quite interesting. People will source these, seek out and source these quite a bit. Good. So I don't, for my part, I don't see anything wrong with this. How can we, as we get started on it, how can we, are there ways to improve upon it? There was a different discussion that you don't happen to have Figma hanging around, do you?
Yep.
And if it runs in your browser, I'll be amazed because it just kills mine every time. But we're having a different discussion. Actually, it was within mesh map and how, well, it wasn't specific to mesh map. It was more like in Meshery UI, how do people take a pattern or take an application and configure it? And we started talking about the ordering experiences, the configuration experiences that people have as you order something online. You'll go to some website and you'll order an item, and that item might be configurable. Maybe you're ordering a piece of clothing and you want it of a certain size, or you want it of a certain color, and you can configure that order. You might be ordering a computer, and like maybe you want to put in a certain video card or size, or there are various resources in there. And that might be how we bring the type of experience inside of Meshery UI for when someone is basically ordering an application to be provisioned. How would they want to configure it? And so Aditya within here, I guess I actually dropped it into the, just to maybe to save time, maybe I'll share this if I can.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
I gave you the wrong direction. So sorry. So there in the layer 5 designs, there's a page that calls for, well, that's an initial design, like an early design for what we might do that Aditya has just done. So there's a page on Layer 5 IO now that's service mesh patterns, and it just is basically a long list of what the patterns are, the names and what they are. What we're looking to do is make a full catalog of patterns. And so what Aditya is showing is that each pattern, while it has a name and it belongs to a category, it would also have a unique ID, and it would also have a visualization of what that is. And so here's one that's for the circuit breaker, and it's just visualizing the fact that you can break the circuit between two services. Here's one, maybe something like this for rate limiting, where there's a lot of traffic coming through, but then you apply a rate limiter and it slows it down. It's, and so these might be examples of what Aditya was showing, where they have the different icons and then the different names. The names, like if you go to meshery.io, we haven't really solidified on a naming scheme, but this was just kind of an example here that if this is the circuit breaker pattern, maybe this is service mesh pattern 87. I don't know if it should be SMP, because that's actually the same moniker, the same abbreviation for service mesh performance. So maybe not. But anyway, that's the type of metadata that you'll have about a given pattern. And just in thinking about this for a moment, just sort of brainstorming about this for a moment, there were two thoughts that I had, and that was of the people that were having the discussion about ordering things online, there was homework taken away for everyone to identify like one of their most favorite ordering experiences or configuration experiences. And I think it was Gaurav had pointed out that he enjoys Grofers. I think grofers.com maybe. And so it's an online grocery store. And I was just looking over rice, I guess, or something. I clicked on it, and this is not distinct from most other sites that Amazon.com or Walmart.com, right? Whatever your favorite shopping site is. It's like, hey, it gives you just, they have various levels of details that you can dive into, I think, on a given product. And this is probably the most detailed view of this product. So it's like, they've got a picture or a series of pictures. Maybe you can grab it and swirl it around in a 360 view, maybe product detail. So if you imagine that this was, it just sort of struck me that like, oh, if what Aditya has, if you were to click on the picture in Aditya's service mesh patterns catalog, and it were to give you a quick view or maybe more of a detailed view, that this thing is presented in a modal on this larger catalog page. So in the back, there was like, however many products, however many patterns I clicked on a pattern, it shows me then one view of the pattern, maybe another, whatever else makes sense in terms of visualizing the pattern. And then the fact that like, oh yeah, well, the pattern details are that you would, suggested uses are like when you're running this type of an app or when you're using this type of a service mesh, use this if it is important to you. Or it might be like, over here, it's like caveats for use, like when not to use this thing. Like a check mark, like this is great for use if you like to have a lot of telemetry. This pattern is poor for use if you have high volume of whatever. Like, so things like this that could explain the pattern. And then down below, you can say, well, related pattern, by the way, if this is the rate limiting pattern, maybe there's the JWT based rate limiting pattern right here. It's just like an offshoot of it. They're related, but slightly different. And so, by the way, the performance overhead that you generally incur, if you're going to enable this pattern, you can expect to pay 200 milliseconds in latency or whatever, 2 milliseconds of latency for this thing in general. And like maybe part of what you would see in terms of the visualizations is like, yeah, there's a consistent baseline test or benchmark test rather, that's run for each of these patterns. In this particular pattern, you click to go, maybe to the next visualization, and it shows you a chart saying, yeah, here's against the such and such benchmark, the service mesh performance benchmark. Here's why it is on average is a 2 millisecond latency cost. So you're not purchasing patterns in terms of rupees, you're purchasing them in terms of. So I thought that there was just a real direct analogy to a catalog of patterns and a catalog of, well, food in this case, or a catalog of. And at some point you're like, oh, it's like add to cart. It's like, well, or add to my meshery, right? Like import into my meshery or whatever the button is called. And that would be really easy. Like, what's her name? Meghana has been working on the ability to import. She has a UI now for importing patterns from HTTP URL into your meshery system. So like in a very real way, if this is the URL to the pattern, you just go over to meshery and it'll import it. Maybe in the catalog over time, like you can see which patterns you've imported, how many times you've used them, if you're currently using the pattern, if there's a new version of that pattern out, because maybe when the pattern first came out, it said, maybe the pattern evolved over time. Huh. That's pretty cool. I mean, if you put yourself into the driver's seat of someone who's running infrastructure, like let's say that you're running discuss.layer5.io and the damn thing won't stay running, or it runs really slow, and you're in the hot seat for being the person to be responsible for this thing staying up. And you're like, oh, maybe I should be applying the resiliency pattern. Like, but you'd want to, like, you don't know if you're doing it right or wrong. Like you're doing it wrong over here. So what's the right way to be running this on a service mesh? Well, let me take a tried and true pattern and I'll subscribe to that, or I'll import that. So yeah, that was part of the thought about how this might evolve. We are all set up to be super sexy on this site. Meaning, and by that, I mean like, yeah, whatever. The Layer5 IO site is different than the Meshery IO site. It may be that Aditya, you've taken it just exactly, like that's a fantastic thing you've done, that's as far as we want to go on that site, that either we pour in the rest of the things that I was just describing onto this site, because or and let people really interconnect, because like in order to interconnect and like import your pattern or tell how many patterns you're running, or and maybe this should be in Meshery UI as well, maybe that you need to be using a remote provider. So last thought, and then I'll shut up, and that is, I was just thinking about it very briefly and thought like, well, gosh, if there's if we're gonna have categories of patterns and little symbols, little logos for each pattern, well, there's this landscape of, in this case, it's cloud native projects that show you projects by category. So under the service mesh category, you're seeing some very familiar projects. Two of the ones that you guys have all created. Another one that you maintain. Another one that Meshery provides conformance for. A few that Meshery provide conformance for and orchestrate, right? Where's Shreyas? Shreyas Mishra is working on this adapter right now. Anyway, like this community touches almost all these things. I don't know what this is. Oh, it's a service mesh. Oh boy. It's true. Another service mesh came out this year. I didn't even know it. Really? Oh, okay, we have to go look. But who has thoughts and comments about what we were just saying, on the catalog? And so this site right here that I was suggesting, like if you were to take a look at one of the cards, you say, well, what's that pattern about? Oh, okay, here's the pattern. There's the thing, the overview. Oh yeah, it's here's the number, like here's generally what it does. Maybe this is like when to use it, when not to use it. I don't know, or people that are using it, or I don't know. This probably isn't as great, but this site itself is open source, this whole site, this whole landscape. So the cards and the system and things, this is all open source. And I was just thinking like, well, this would be a different way of presenting the patterns, would be by category, which is in part what Aditya was just saying. It's like, oh, I'll create a filter where people can filter on the category. It's like, okay, yeah, that good. Also, it could be that people look at, they view the whole thing in terms of categories. But yeah, I don't know that this is a good suggestion that we actually take and use this site. It's probably just good inspiration. So thoughts from everyone else though. What everybody thinking? Yeah, one more that. It seemed like, yeah, nice. Yeah, good. Yeah, Nikhil, that's awesome. We want to, I think to a lot of people, what we're doing seems disparate. Like we're doing this service mesh performance thing, and then we're doing like some get Nighthawk thing. What the F that is, I don't know. But like, why we're doing learning paths? Like, actually, when you do them long enough, I hope that for all of you, it becomes a lot more apparent how integrated they really are, or especially as we look at something like this, it's like, oh, if we're telling the world, like what do you all do when you want to learn about Kubernetes? What do you do? Like, or you want to learn Golang or something? You're like, hey, is there, or you sometimes buy, you might get a book on it. You might, to the extent that you get, or to the extent that you get a book, maybe you get that from O'Reilly. Like that's a great, great place to get it. If we, and by the way, I don't know how many times I've offered this to any of you, if you want to get your name in a book, we have more opportunity to do that kind of a thing than, so this book is like, hopefully a long-standing, this isn't tethered to Istio, it's not tethered to Kuma, like these patterns apply irrespective. We've hopefully, for those who've been, well, directly contributing to it, or those that have been paying attention in the Meshery websites call, like these are real. We really are creating patterns that you can actually apply universally across the different service meshes. Like, yes, they're riddled with caveats, or they ultimately will be, but there's many of them that are very generic and do work across them. We do have a pattern system now. We're now going to start work on our workflow engine, which will help with these patterns. There is a visualization tool. The mesh map is a thing. You can visualize it. You can't, I don't think anyone has seen this necessarily. And I know that we're over time, so I'll say this. If you want to stick around, I'll give you a sneak peek of mesh map and how you can see 5 different service meshes on it. But if you need to take off, this is an opportune time to say, for us to conclude this call. As we go to conclude and say thank you, Zane, did we need to talk about the mailing list real quick?
Yeah, sure. Aditya, can you please share that?
The screen.
Yeah, the PR.
Yeah, I'll do
I'm
it.
not on my lab. That's why.
So many tabs open, I can't keep track. This one, right?
Yeah.
Hmm.
The Netlify deploy.
Okay, deployed. Where is it? Okay, there you are.
Nice.
Yeah,
Looking good.
so basically the issue with this was like it's fine, only me like he had used Bootstrap, if I'm not wrong, which we don't use, so only that, like he had, I think that was the last review, right, where we
Yeah,
just had to create a style sheet for all the styles.
yeah, I've changed that. There's one more issue. In the home page, we are importing the same two components. So can you go to the home page too?
Yeah.
The Meshery IO. Yeah, here down.
This, right?
So yeah, this.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, so okay, good in general. There's 2 issues. One is the homepage is egregiously long as it is.
Yeah.
Like it's pretty darn long,
Yeah.
and that certainly adds to. The second thing is, so that doesn't mean that you couldn't let someone maybe have an expandable section, or or just beautify the other. The /subscribe, or what? Yeah, I mean, this is not bad. This is nice already. What I would do is, your the secondary line that says Meshery maintainers mailing list, is to just remove that line, because it's too redundant of the one above. That there's too much text. That it's a nice design. Don't get me wrong. It's just that there's 4 things that we're telling people about. And the most important things that I think you've got captured, which is the ability to subscribe, the email address that's actually used, the title of the thing, and the description. Good. That secondary description is just too much for the lazy reader it doesn't add anything.
Like even over here, I don't think it's required, because measure users. We're already saying it's from measure users, so we don't need that here.
Yeah. So what do we do about the homepage? I too
Yeah.
thought it's going to be there.
It's really pretty. Well, you might be able to get the whole thing reduced to, like, you might be able to keep the cards, but if all that you have is,
Just the name.
yeah, potentially just the name and the button, like something like that. Like, and then maybe if someone hovers and then you show a tooltip, or like if they click on the card itself might expand, so they want to see the details. But otherwise, that way you could actually squish all 5 of, like the security reports. You can actually cut that one. That's just a one-way, like, vulnerability reporting. If someone finds a vulnerability, they can report that in, but otherwise it's not like that one we can chop from here.
Okay.
And then, yeah, so it leaves you with 4. You might be able to squish them into, like, they can actually, so if you go back up just a smidge to the general, yeah, there's probably enough room that you can fit in 4 small cards off to the right or something. That,
Yeah. Okay. In the same row with 2 columns, right?
yeah. And
I'll try that.
One question. Even if we can also have a call out instead of having the complete form, like call out to the subscribe page, which would highlight the form as well as the 4 cards.
So we have a call out on the page right now.
Yeah, we have in the
We have
I think the recent PR.
To the subscribe page,
sorry.
to the flat subscribe page where we have the mailing list subscription.
Oh yeah. Okay. No, here we
We
don't.
are on the nav.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, in that case, then we can do what we say, make the cards shorter and should make it look at beside the current.
Yeah, we can put 4 cards over here, if like something like that.
We can keep 4 divs here, right? As it is now.
Yeah, probably.
yeah, I mean, if you wanted to literally not just have the button, I mean, like, you know, I don't think you can go, I don't think either, whether you just have the button or you have 4 small cards that have half as much info, either way there, it's about the same. And that, yeah, you can fit all 4 into a group here. That, yeah, the compare and contrast the service mesh landscape, that can be placed somewhere else. That it is somewhat obvious to most what the development mailer is versus the user mailer versus the community mailer, like just the names of them. Hopefully, for anyone who's been around the, you know, like, so yeah, you can get it pretty squished.
Okay.
And yeah, whether
so should I name component or do I just write another one? Because
do you think you can work it out with the same component? I think it'll fit if you try. You can try doing it with the same component itself.
okay.
Otherwise, whatever you're comfortable with, it wouldn't really matter.
Okay.
Like whichever is easier, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Since we're on the topic of this page, I just wanted to talk about the getting started part. So right now we have a gray color, which is a little dull. So I thought we could use this, but
Yeah,
Lee, you said there is some color clash, but I don't see that. Is it?
it's mostly with well, it looks different here than it did in the screenshot. It looked like the background was a little more green, from a green gradient.
Yeah, it is. This is like this is a gradient from gray to dark jungle green. Like this part is dark jungle green and this is gray.
Let's try, or like, hey, I don't, unless somebody else has a doesn't want to, then it seems like we can give this a shot, like, and post it and see how it plays.
Mhm.
Okay. I'll put in a PR, so it'll be easier, like, to preview it on their own screens.
Nice, nice. All right, so very briefly, for those that are, so thanks everyone for coming. If you need to go, please do. I had said that I'd try to help make real some of the efforts by demoing mesh map. So I was just starting up my system. It should be the case that it is, well, honestly, I don't know. Let's see what it's starting. Let me make this larger. So we're starting the latest stable version of Meshery. Okay. Good. I think I don't know if it's running in Kubernetes. May very well be. It's running on Kubernetes, which is fine. Although I did just get an issue. Restarting because I don't get the remote provider here. So we'll restart and see and get that provider back. So, by the way, the thing that we're about to look at right now is we will end up doing a recording of this, what I'm about to show, for the Service Mesh Con. So there's a talk that we have at Service Mesh Con, which, by the way, we need to go ahead and open up an issue and track, assuming that they've posted it. Open as an event that we're speaking at. Service Mesh Con. It's on Service Mesh Patterns by the book. Or it's called Service Mesh Patterns by the book. Oh, geez. Okay. So we're the first talk after the keynotes. Sweet. People can get their Meshery fill. So goodness, we need to open up an issue to track that event. All right. Hopefully Meshery is back up. Good. So right now there's an alpha program that's been opened up to give a couple of users access to MeshMap as it's like in an alpha phase. For the vast majority of you that are on the call, if this can be opened up to you as well. But there are a few other people in the community who are not contributors. They're just they're users or power users. And so the program, there's a whole program that's asks for them to perform certain tasks and things. It might be that that's appropriate to take some of you through as well. So I'm holding on for a moment to see if the operator and mesh sync are connected. Hopefully we'll have enhancements coming through here shortly that make this a little easier. There's an issue with mesh sync. But I think that's fine for what we were going to look at in mesh map. So here's mesh map. There are two modes to mesh map. There's a designer mode, which is the mode that we're in right now. And there's a visualizer mode that I think has an issue at the moment. So I'll open this last because it might fail on us. in designer mode, this will be the world's only service mesh designer. There isn't another one of these. And it will let you design your mesh. So if you wanted to create an Istio service mesh, that you could do so. You would, that visually you can go through, design out how your apps, how these are supposed to interrelate, how I'm just doing random stuff about like, but then you can save this and it automatically saves as a, well, basically as a pattern or in the same format as a pattern, that you could do this for different service meshes. So some of you have been working on how this is created itself. So I'm giving a terrible overview, but the point is like these various items that you can configure, as you drop them onto the canvas, they may ask you to fill in different aspects of their configuration. You're able to save those as patterns. You're able to do that across different types of service meshes. So right now it's Open Service Mesh, Istio, Kuma, and Linkerd. Some of them have the appropriate logo and some don't. Like I said, you can load into Meshry different Envoy filters. Take those filters and apply them to your mesh, to your pattern as well. I'm gonna refresh my screen. You can take pre-existing pattern files that you might have written and click on them to load them. So this is a very simple pattern, just had one element. But if we click on these other ones, I guess there's a couple of things that we need to do to make this more navigable. So the patterns that we were just talking about, that whole catalog of them, you'll be able to import them in, upload the pattern either from file or from a URL, the URL being this meshry.io/patterns, or the catalog potentially. Let me make a change to what's maybe a more interesting pattern. I don't know. We search for info. Okay. I don't know that there's anything that's like really. Bulk delete, I think finally. I'll just make a quick change to this one. Part of the reason being is so that one will show up at the top of the list here. This isn't paginated just yet. So never mind. So I guess that pattern doesn't load. But the point is you're able to save and configure your patterns and view them, export them, delete them, apply them, like take the pattern and click to have Meshry deploy the thing. And so in concept, after it has done that and deployed, that then you can switch into visualizer mode and you'll see a visual topology of your deployments here. So this is more like read-only mode, whereas that other mode here is designer mode. So you design it, interact with it, test it out, see if it makes sense, then click to apply it, go over to, you have to use your imagination, unfortunately, but you'd be seeing, normally you'd be seeing a set of nodes. You can lay them out in different structures. This would be a lot more impressive when you can actually connect to the node. You can start a logging session or start streaming the logs from that node, from that container rather, from that pod or set of containers or set of streams. You can also click to initiate an interactive terminal. So you can attach to your containers terminal and start interacting with, it would be like as if you have an SSH session here. So because Mesh Sync is not running in this environment, it's a terrible demo. That's a Kubernetes an issue with mesh sync and Kubernetes at the moment. If I run this on Docker, that should go away. Anyway, I don't know that anybody wants to stick around to see that. I'm stopping Meshry on Kubernetes and starting Meshry as it's deployed on Docker. And hopefully stopping and starting at the same time doesn't conflict. But there's the two things that I mentioned in the visualizer mode they're kind of neat to see. There's something I didn't really, I guess the server, I just stopped this so it doesn't work, but something I didn't demonstrate very clearly is the fact that there's a context menu where you can edit the configuration of those individual components. You can delete or copy or duplicate them here. But in the visualizer mode, there's also a context menu so that you like right click on the node and you get this circular context menu that will let you take certain actions like starting the log streaming, the interactive terminal, maybe invoking a performance test. I forget what the other action was. I started up the local context. That'll be on edge latest, which I don't, which Meshry should not. Meshry won't actually, I'm sorry, mesh map. There is no edge latest of mesh map. So I'm kind of taking you all on a wild channel switch for my local context. So feel free to I'll keep demoing here once this gets deployed on Docker. Does anybody think that they're ready to interact with MeshMap? It might be. There's that alpha program. People are being asked. Hold on. Okay, so I tried starting and stopping Meshry quickly, so I'm not sure if it, let's see what it's running or which one is running. Okay, good. So the default, my current context, this is probably confusing for everyone, but my current context, it's set to run on Kubernetes. It's my current context is called Kate's. That's just the name that I gave it. Its configuration is subscribed to the stable channel, the latest release of the stable channel, and it's to be deployed on Kubernetes. And so if I just do a status using my Kate's context, it's going to look to Kubernetes and ask Kubernetes what all components of Meshry are running. It's like, okay, well, right now it's just these three things. It's the broker, it's the Meshry operator, which has the broker and mesh sync. But the actual context that I told to run, I told to run my local context. So I have multiple contexts of Meshry here in my config file. So the local context, which is, by the way, that's the default, it's set for the platform of Docker and set to run the stable latest. Okay, so if I do a status for the local context, oops, my keyboard has this issue with the extra A's. I gotta fix the keyboard. But it says that, oh, actually, most Meshry server and its adapters, they're running on Docker, while the operator and mesh sync are running on Kubernetes. Okay, good. That's actually what I was trying to do. Let me start a new session. So log in.
Early, your screen is not shared, I guess, right?
Reshare.
And now it's shared.
Now it's shared.
Oh. So okay, so now we're logging in to a mesh tree that's running on Docker. It's a little bit confusing because it says it's using in cluster. That seems wrong. Oops. Let's disconnect that. That's hold on. Boy, it sure is getting okay. Okay, good. And we do have mesh sync connected. And okay, great. So now, if we go in and look at, this is probably going to hurt the system a fair bit. If we try to look at the there's some performance improvements that need to go on, but great. So on the visualizer, great. The visualizer's now, well, trying to respond. So these things are actually running. So the system that I'm running in, it's running 3 service meshes, Istio, Kuma, and Open Service Mesh. Great, at these versions. Those are actually running. If we go over to mesh map, this is the same patterns capability that we were talking about a moment ago. One thing I didn't really describe very well is that there's this context menu in which you can go edit a given component and update certain qualities that it has, certain traits, save and give new names to your patterns. We need to improve this so you can import patterns maybe directly from here. But what we were going to show is the visualizer mode. I'm trying to switch to a different mode so that it doesn't show all these same, so it doesn't show so many entities. If you were to click on a node, like let's say Grafana, it will give you a few things that you can do with it. So one is to start watching logs. Let's hope, well, let's try it again. Nope.
You have to select it firstly.
Oh.
Left click, then right click. And I think it needs to be a pod.
Ah, that's a great point. And so that's Tanuj, that's definitely something for us to, so here's that same Grafana pod. So by the way, Tanuj, another thing that's happening is, it seems like every time that we're getting that mesh sync is sending an update, we're refreshing this subscription here because it tends to rearrange on me. So select it. Boom. Okay. So that's a little tricky. Tanuj is one of the individuals that's been busy creating some of this functionality. So when we started, so, and by the way, Tanuj, this will prove part of the point of the work that you're doing, which is when I click on this pod, I initiate a logging session. I start to see, I start to stream logs back for what's happening on Grafana. And right now, like nothing is. If I were to visit Grafana, which I think is here, maybe. Do we see anything new? I don't know. if we even would. I don't know that using Grafana would necessarily create any logs. But anyway, in that pod, there is just one container. Okay, good. There, by the way, Tanuj, right now, we don't necessarily have a way to stop the streaming other than this switch, I think. So for kube proxy, we are seeing new logs come through. I guess to answer my question, like this, we do have the ability to X out here. Okay. Anyway, you could also, conceptually, you should also be able to connect to the thing and have an interactive session. Well, assuming that this type of Tanuj, you don't remember, we were having a bug at one point.
Which bug?
Yeah, if the response back from the session was coming through. Sure, what a good, if we try to connect to that Grafana pod and see what it. Now I've switched the terminal to the Grafana terminal. It's funny, when I type ls, it sends it as SL. You see that? L, it's got the L, now I hit S, and then it switches to SL. Okay, well, anyway, good. So it's a work in progress for sure. But Tanuj, like, these are really good things for us to take back. If someone wanted to apply a pattern, like, that's part of what we were thinking. Another thing is, if someone wants to initiate a performance test, they can just do so from right there. The issue is that we would need to fill in this URL to test. So Tanuj, this is some good notes. Like, we want for people to be able to perform a performance test on a service, while we want for people to be able to perform a log streaming or an interactive terminal on a pod. So we're going to want to have actions consider that context, the node type. Yeah, we're not getting the responses back. Anyway, so I don't know if that inspired people or just really depressed people with the number of bugs that we have. But at various points, as people give demos, like, it works, or those things work. So that's what the effort's been like. There are about 10 or more people who are part of that, who are developing and contributing to that. So Tanuj is one of those. Zane is on the fringe. Aditya is too good for a mesh map. So yeah, Nikhil, it's when it's an actual demo and it works, it's really neat. It's so cool. It's so cool to see what you guys have created. It's so cool. It's another one of those things where you can't get that anywhere else in the world. There's only one place in the world you can get. There's 3 other competing visual topologies out there. One of them is open source and it's been around. It's Kiali, and it's been out there for quite some time. It's works for Istio, and only Istio will only ever work for Istio, like for sure. And good, it does good stuff. We're not trying to create a Kiali Me Too, like just another Kiali. Like no, this thing has a bunch of different use cases. First of all, it has a whole designer and all these patterns that you could go pull from and apply. Like it's and it'll orchestrate that. And it's not just about applying the config, it's about the patterns themselves. This hasn't been articulated very well. Patterns will also enforce an ongoing behavior. So there's a couple of people who are going to start on a workflow engine now. It's one of the internships that we just announced on Friday. And that, by the way, any of you are welcome to participate in any of the, if you want to work on the workflow engine, great. It's not that only the interns can work on that. That's not the, but the patterns will let you enforce behavior. So if you wanted if part of your pattern was the fact that you wanted to run a load test against that particular node or that service on an ongoing basis, and that you wanted to evaluate the response of the performance, like if it was lesser than a certain number of milliseconds of latency, the pattern engine, the workflow engine will facilitate that. If you wanted to do a canary rollout, good, almost all the service meshes out there facilitate traffic splitting. Like you're gonna have 2 versions of your service. You want to canary across them, meaning like you want to send some amount of traffic over here and some amount of traffic over there. Nice. You can configure the mesh in a static way, 10% that way, 90% here. You watch it for a while, that looks good. All right, 20% here, 80%, you can update it statically. Like none of the service meshes today, the control planes of them, you can't just say, I want you to automate a canary based on these constraints, this criteria, like start like in steps of 10%, canary from this version to that version and look at this metric. If this metric is good, then just keep doing it 10% over all the way from, all the way until you're totally switched. You have to use third-party tools for that today. And there are open source tools for that. There's also commercial offerings for that. Meshery is going to do that. And the workflow engine will facilitate that. So the patterns, when you express a pattern, you can express that in there. Like what type of canarying do you want to do over either using whatever criteria that is? Is it duration based over a certain period? And if so, when do you move to the next step? Is that just purely duration? Is that based on some other metric, percentage of error or number of errors or percentage latency or whatever the thing is? So the pattern, yeah, it's going to be a big old deal. And that's why eventually a pattern catalog wherein you're describing like, hey, how do you know what's the best practice for a canary? Like, is it really increments of 10% stepping? Like, should I have 10 steps and 10% each time? Or what metrics should I be watching? Is it okay to expect a couple of errors as we step through this or 0? Like what? And so people will, I got to believe, like they're going to commonly go to a pattern and say, oh, okay, well, that's how people are generally doing it. Maybe that fits what I need and maybe not. And if not, they can import it and visually change it. It's one of the things like I would crap my pants if I was running discuss.layer5.io and I'm like, yeah, we should make a change where we're gonna make a change to the service mesh and reconfigure the way the traffic is running. It's like if I'm describing that in YAML, there might be doo-doo in my pants at that point because I'd be really scared to be convinced that what I've just changed in YAML, in fact, the traffic is going to reroute and direct in the way in which I thought it would. Like, I'm not really sure. I'd much rather have that visually articulated to me so that I can see, oh yeah, the arrow that I drew that I want traffic to go over there and then over to there, like good. I'm pretty darn convinced that I've designed what I would like for it to happen. And then I will let the system take care of the rest of that. So yeah, that's where we're aimed. We need to get busy on mesh map though, and some fixes so we can demo that thing. With that, thanks everybody. Thanks for humoring me and sticking around to talk about mesh map. It's gonna be really good.